Every fan of Adventure Time knows this episode's about Finn growing up. At the start of the episode, Finn and Jake are reminiscing on Finn's more immature moments, him causing the end of his relationship with Flame Princess, and the dungeon train, showing Finn's more immature way of coping with the situation. One of the biggest lessons Finn learns in this episode is about perspective. He learns the ups and downs of letting other people's perspectives influence his growth, as well as learning to experience things from new perspectives. Repeatedly, Jake and BMO convince or force Finn to open his eyes too soon. This would send him back to the dungeon, where he'd have to do all of this over again. They do this because, from their perspective, this situation makes no sense. Or they just don't believe him. From Finn's perspective, it's been months of him dealing with this. He's heard every pep talk and every word of advice that these two could give. And every time, they end up getting him to open his eyes too soon, sending him back to the beginning, and then he has to do all of this over again. While that's the downside of it, there's also an upside to it where other people's perspective can help, such as BMO's words coming to Finn's mind when he finally needs to open his eyes, finally feeling that something's different. Two other lessons that Finn had to learn throughout this episode were following his instincts and pushing through uncertainty. At the beginning of the episode, Finn tries mapping out the dungeon, but that doesn't work because every time Finn opens his eyes, he gets sent back to the beginning of the dungeon and it changes. The only way for Finn to get through this dungeon is to close his eyes and move forward following his instincts. This also ties into him having to face uncertainty because you can't map out what's coming ahead of you, especially if something's always changing. When Finn faces this uncertainty and follows his instincts, he's finally able to egress from the dungeon. Later on in the episode, he'll have to continue relying on his instincts because he separates from Jake and BMO. He wanders across the land of Ooh, waiting for something to be different, waiting for that moment where he feels like he can finally take off the blindfolds. He's wandering, relying on his instincts to find his way to wherever he needs to be, and those instincts would lead him to the exit of the trial, where he finds another hall of egress, but this one's in a desert. His instincts even told him when to take the blindfolds off. A lesson that this episode had that I resonated with was that sometimes you need to detach and reassess the situation in order to keep moving forward. This lesson was put on display when Finn realized that Jake and BMO, while not meaning any harm, were holding him back from getting through this trial. If the Hall of Egress was trying to get Finn to a new level of maturity, Jake and BMO were trying to force him to the finish line without learning the lessons. Because of that, he detached himself from the situation and reassessed what he needed to do, wandering the land of Ooh until he found another Hall of Egress, though he wasn't necessarily looking for it. There's a later episode that shows Finn implementing the lessons that he learned in Hall of Egress, as well as showing just a more mature mindset, that episode being Bun Bun. Hall of Egress started with Finn and Jake recognizing Finn's childishness, and this episode shows Finn rectifying his mistakes. Finn apologizes for his screwed up actions that led to Phoebe breaking up with him, as well as recognizing why his half-assed apology in Frost and Fire didn't mean anything. He didn't know what he was apologizing for, but this time he was able to give a sincere apology, and they were able to become friends. While this portion might not seem too connected to Hall of Egress, I believe it's Finn's growth in that episode that leads to him giving a real apology to FP, mending their relationship. Flame Princess even acknowledges Finn's more mature mindset. His apology to Flame Princess is also a solid conclusion to Finn's arc of maturity. Said maturity arc beginning because Finn messed up their relationship, but also them becoming friends being what ends it. The many ways this episode can be dissected can warrant hours of discussion, but I try to keep my videos pretty short for right now. I'll probably revisit this later on when I want to make longer videos, but that'll come later. And with that said, I hope you have a nice day, and I'll catch you later.